Good evening. The opinions and statements voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network. Enjoy the shows.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
Now, historic films made in the spring of 1948 and just released show Eniwetok preparing for heavily guarded and still largely secret tests of new atomic weapons. The test's purpose is to measure atomic effects on thousands of different materials, 30,000 tons of them, not, as at Bikini, to prove military effectiveness.
San Francisco police say that 9 persons have been arrested in a narcotics raid on the headquarters of the Grateful Dead, a widely popular singing group. 2 members of the group, Rod McKernan and Robert Weir, and their business manager, Danny Rifkin, have been booked on suspicion of possessing narcotics.
3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
We got a roll program.
Neil Armstrong reporting their roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading.
I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, strange lights are causing a viral buzz on YouTube. Could we have caught extraterrestrial activity on a recent newscast? Brandon Arroyo investigates.
As the newscast ended, the controversy began back on September 26th. What is that light shining in the back of the dark night sky?
With coverage reaching all the way back to 1948, for over 70 years, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Now, Fate Magazine Radio is carrying on that tradition of setting the standard in paranormal talk radio as we report and discuss some of the most mysterious and perplexing phenomena imaginable in this strange world of ours. Now, here is your host of Fate Magazine Radio, Kat Hobson.
But Daniel is the host, editor, and producer for The Vortex, which is his YouTube show. And if you haven't seen it, you need to check it out. The most curious people that I think I've ever met. I met him in Phoenix at the UFO Congress. I had probably come across him other places, but that's when I became aware of him and his work, and I just thought it was great. So, but I got turned on to him as a photographer, which is another interesting thing. I thought that he did some of the best work with that I had ever seen. It was great. And everyone knew him. And I couldn't figure out what was up with that, because I thought that he just must be the most interesting man on the planet. And he's close. He's pretty close. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Daniel in. I will be back with the book title, because I just completely lost my mind. I guess it's just trying to get us on here, Daniel. I don't know if you've had glitches with your stuff too, but that was so odd. And thank you for your patience.
Yeah, hey, Kat. It's great to be here. I'm honored to be your guest for the show. Some of the things that happen with equipment, all the tech stuff, it seems out of our control sometimes, no matter what we do to prepare. I know that all too well. I've had several things just at the last moment on many occasions just completely go crazy, and I'm glad to be here either way. So hopefully, people will enjoy what we're going to be covering tonight. And like you said, I do enjoy being able to share all kinds of different things with people. Appreciate that great intro, and whether it's like you said, photography, things that I am able to share with different events or places that I go, and videos that I make for my YouTube channel and the Vortex. I like to be able to connect with people that have interesting backgrounds or have had some strange experience or involvement with things that intrigues me, and that has something that is tangible we can go do and maybe talk about or have an interview. And so I think connecting all of these different things together in some way has been a really incredible journey, and I share a lot about that in my book Mythos,
Thank
which
you.
is,
The mystical
sort of a
operating
short,
system, mythical
that's
operating
it.
system.
Right.
But you cover all things anomalous in there.
Yeah, I think that there's a particular way that I address all the different facets of the unexplained. But some of the things that I've been involved with are a little bit more oriented or focused as far as the investigative work that I've done and reporting that I've done. In certain areas, probably more than others. I'm fascinated by it all, but I like to be able to actually get involved when and where I can. And so, yeah, we do get into a lot of different things like UFOs, advanced forms of intelligence, whether it's aliens or some other form of life that we're still trying to conceptualize or understand that could be related to other paraphysical, metaphysical, parapsychological phenomena. And I think that all of these things we talk about that Fate has covered for a long time, which I'm a big fan of, by the way. I have a huge stack of Fate magazines here that I sort of inherited or acquired from my buddy, the late Jim Mars, who
I loved him.
had a whole collection. And after he had passed, I inherited a great deal of his possessions and collections and things. So I have a whole stack of probably a few dozen Fate magazines, which are super cool. They have a lot of great information from throughout the years, and I enjoy the scope of what has been covered in a lot of the publications, and of course the radio show, that work that you're doing to help spread awareness about these things as well. This is what I think is a really important part of what we, as a community can do to bring awareness and kind of elevate our understanding and keep, developing. So thanks to you for all of the time that you've devoted and invested in everything with this program and just these strange unexplained mysteries, and doing what we can to connect. And like you said, we met at the International UFO Congress in 2019. And so it's great to be able to get together about this and further the discussion, bring it out of the fringe and into the forefront, and in person. So we had a whole year where we didn't really have a whole lot of events or anything. And I'm glad that as conditions seem to improve, that maybe we can get back into, having physical meetings and gatherings and get back into bringing this, for people to be able to come have a platform to get involved. So thank you for hosting something like that.
Well, it's just a wonderful thing, I think, because you do your share too. In fact, you just got finished in Tyler, didn't you? Didn't you do the Tyler conference?
Yeah, we just had an event called the Tyler Paranormal Conference. That's in Tyler, Texas, about 2.5 hours from where I am here in the DFW area. And I've known about it for years. I've known some of the people involved, but this was my first time to actually be able to attend and be able to present as well. The host of the event, George Jones, he came to me and said, "Hey, are you available for this? I'd like you to speak on something about aliens." And I thought, well, that would be great. And there's so many different directions you can go with that. So I thought I'm going to give a presentation on alien mysteries and the study of xenology, which is a big focus in my book and my publication that I've got working on. So this is something that a lot of people might not really know too well in relation to, let's just say, ufology, the study of UFOs and things related to alien extraterrestrial life. And strange encounters and experiences that people have had. It's so multifaceted. We're not really just dealing with strange objects in the sky. There's many different ways that this can be, brought to attention. And I think that when we focus on something like the potential reality of advanced life forms that may take many different forms and shapes that we haven't even considered, a lot of times we like to consider all the ones that are standard models or types that are in a lot of
standard models. I love that. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these things we see are kind of archetypes that we use through a cultural lens of our own perception as a society. And if we look throughout time, we look back into history, it could be that these similar interactions were taking place in a way that maybe didn't necessarily make sense, or it could make sense to some people, but appeared differently, was perceived differently based upon how people understood their world, different social constructs that they utilized to grasp nature and events around them, and phenomena that we might now think is no big deal, but to ancient people and our ancestors in different groups all over the world at different degrees of sophistication and technological advancement, all of that, might understand different things that they encounter depending on how they view and understand their entire world altogether. And that itself is why I call the work mythos, because it's a mythical operating system through which we construct our world, and all of us have that. It's all something that we participate in collectively as well.
Yes.
And I think that the way we look at that throughout different periods of history clue us into some of these strange encounters that we now look at through the scope of ufology, or through the paranormal or supernatural, or it might even be religious to some people, or spiritual and metaphysical. So I think that a lot of these different encounters have some kind of connection to aspects of reality that we don't necessarily understand all that well, but maybe a little bit better than we used to. So if we continue along that same trajectory using scientific advancements and developments with engineering, I think that we're going to find out a lot of interesting things that we've been wondering for years, and probably since recorded history. And that's really where I think it gets exciting. So we can kind of go over all kinds of different things, but I thought it was probably important to mention that at this Tyler event, everyone's kind of covering paranormal topics, mainly about spectrology, or ghosts, the study of or investigation of paranormal activity and spiritual phenomena. And so that's all interesting to me. That's probably a spoke of the unexplained that I haven't been as involved with as some of the others, like investigating UFOs or other encounters, but also cryptozoology, unusual animals, mystery creatures, things like that is a big area that I'm also fascinated and involved with. But as far as spectrology and all these different ghost hunts and haunted houses or locations, things that people consider to be some sort of spiritual, metaphysical phenomena, that's always something I've been interested in researching, but as a field investigator, I've probably done the least of compared to other focuses that I've had. So it's interesting to me to be able to go to something like a paranormal conference and talk about aliens and how that might be relevant in our understanding of, how we investigate similar unexplained phenomena, and what it might help us understand scientifically with something like the study of xenology, because we might find what we consider aliens might not always be EBEs, which is extraterrestrial biological entities. It could be that some form of intelligence doesn't require the same capacity of embodiment that we might think is necessary for intelligence to exist within. Like all of the biological entities here on Earth come in many forms. You've got the different animal and plant and insect kingdoms, and all of these things show us that organic material life seems to be the most consistent, at least here on our planet. It might not be the case in other planets and other dimensions and other degrees of consciousness. And I think that that's going to be something we find out is a really important part of our understanding of what's possible with and consciousness and intelligence overall. So it could be that maybe what people are experiencing as disembodied spirits, ghosts, apparitions, whatever words we use to it in an attempt to define these things could be forms of intelligence or aspects of our consciousness in a way that we haven't yet really been able to describe or understand scientifically. I think that some people have real, genuine and sincere experiences, which they might personally understand. We all have our personal, independent, or individual disposition on these types of things. But as across the board, when we talk about how something is a standard for our societal awareness, like what's considered normal, most people generally consider different things like, since the advent of the microscope, we've learned a lot about bacteria, germs, cells, things that exist that maybe before weren't really well known or even known at all. So as we elevate the sort of median of society to a basic new place of awareness, it allows us to open our mind to the possibility that maybe there's something else that we don't know. We're not really at the pinnacle of all knowledge. We're always growing and developing. So within these types of events and within my publication, I always attempt to do what I can to sort of plant the seed that can show us that where there's room to grow with these mysterious subjects and areas of interest of mine and of many people and those who are familiar with fate and really like all of this stuff and have done years of research into many things, I think that what we're seeing is how something that allows us to have a new sense of understanding, based upon a discovery.
Absolutely.
It's really important that maybe the way that that's declared, not just discovered, but declared, openly across the board to everybody, whether it's on the media, the news, a scientific institution, that's really important to reach out to the basic person who has no interest in any of this stuff, who doesn't otherwise know about it unless they're told on the news or someone mentions it to them, because they're not going to go out of their way to research this stuff like a lot of us and part of these programs and listening to some of these things. We might hear about information that we otherwise might not on other outlets. So some people, the lay person, the common people out in society who aren't really as aware about a lot of these things, they don't go out of their way to try to figure it out. They might hear it from something.
Exactly.
So if we help to make sure that the declarations of these new discoveries are made as such that it's not really a matter of debate in some way. I mean, sure, you can always debate things, but it's going to be confirmed or made aware that these are basic properties of nature now. So when we talk about supernatural or paranormal, these are just words that we use in an attempt to describe things that are happening that don't seem to be ordinary to us based upon our grasp of the world. And I think that what we see is there's so much still out there that we maybe can only fathom a bit of. So if we continue to develop new discoveries and make progress in that way, scientifically, we come out and we elevate the basic standard level of the public, and that public collective consciousness can therefore be elevated based upon new forms of awareness. And I think that's really a big part of what we're doing. You see a lot of shows and things. At first I was very kind of adverse to a lot of those things, and a lot of them that sort of poked fun or did a mockery of or wasn't really in the best interest of the subject matter itself. And then in some sense, I looked back later on and thought, well, at least it's touching people, it's touching their minds and maybe their hearts emotionally in a way that allows them to shift who they are.
Well, it's getting the conversation started.
Right. So there's a lot to what those shows are doing that helps the people that don't know about any of this stuff reach a better place in their own sense of self-discovery to be open to these things. And I see that happen to people all the time.
Okay, I'm going to have to interrupt you, Daniel.
Go for it. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, we've got to take a little break. And we have a question that's actually relevant to that when we come back. So we'll get that when we come. Be right back. Y'all come back too.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope.
That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama. Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting. You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
This is Jason Bland, host of Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup, where we stream live as a webcast every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern, with guests who will blow your mind. Live ghost box sessions where you can call into the show to see if the spirits will talk to you, and the World Wide Web of Weird with the latest in paranormal news and evidence. We're bringing the weird every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow and subscribe.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour. Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate Magazine. You are listening to us here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama, although we are on the road this week. And my guest tonight is Daniel Allen Jones, he's just interesting, and I know that y'all are going to find him so too. He is so curious that he's also very fearless on how he seeks his information. He will just go get it. And you don't find that a lot. People are intimidated for whatever reason by whether it's celebrity or education or just time in the field. And Daniel, I have noticed that none of those things faze you in the least. You will go to get your answers, and I love that about you.
Well, Kat, I think that with some of the people who I've looked up to over the years, I've learned a lot about the integrity of investigative journalism and reporting the facts in an unbiased way. But the thing is that some of these people involved in different circles, all these different arenas that we see that intermingle at events and things that you see happen on shows. There's so much out there that people don't see that's behind the scenes. But what I've realized is that some people tend to, if they find a person, a figure, a speaker, whatever it is, likable, then they'll end up, or there's some idea of loyalty to a certain person or their disposition on things. They sometimes, regardless of the validity of information or a detriment to their claims, they will cling to some of the things that can otherwise be questioned or interrogated. And I think that it's important that even though we might find people likable and, people are great. Some people, they mean really well, but they're absolutely telling false information. And I think that it's important to understand or have had some illegitimate background which they use falsely in an attempt to appear more impressive or something that is credible, or in a way that people are impacted to like them more or make them more believable. And I think it's important when we look at events that have tangible things that we can address, timeframes, documents, corroborative witnesses or other people, then it's important to see, okay, what can we really do to figure out what's going on? And whether you're looking at a case, a person's background, or a situation historically, some things are still readily available, whereas others don't really want to really address certain things. I think it's important that we maintain the integrity and the honor of doing scientific work to the best of our ability. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a degreed or accredited, specialist that can make claims and declarations. I think that some people might be able to do, but I can at least do the minimal I can. The minimum contribution I can make is to have an opportunity to go to these people that are here. They're available, they're accessible at events, or I can get in touch with them just like mostly anyone else could. I mean, I think if I can do these things, that there are a lot of people out there who could as well, but may not be willing or have the know-how or the technology or whatever they think prevents them. I think that really a lot of this is more accessible than people realize. If you can manage to ask people questions or sit down and just talk to them and just be straightforward and honest, I feel I like to uphold, a degree of honor. If someone that I know has something happen that I think is questionable, I can approach them in a way that I'm not necessarily going to be, it's the approach is really important in how you have to interrogate some of these things or question someone or just investigate, interview them in a way that is allowing them to have a platform or the ability to respond to accusations that may not be like directly from you or me per se, but from people within the community in general. And I think that it's important to be able to get into some of those things in a way that, you're not necessarily personally attacking them. It's not necessarily
it's just getting the info.
Right. We really want to be able to get down to the bottom of a situation truthfully, in a way that people feel, okay, at least there are different sides to how things can be viewed. We understand that events can all be perceived differently, but if there are things that we can really get into and ask, and those people who aren't afraid to ask certain things and ask, did you hoax this, or did this really happen, or were you really involved with this, and do you have ways to substantiate those claims or verify that? I think a lot of times people tend to feel uncomfortable when that's brought up, or it might even be discouraged to ask those types of things like at events during the Q&A or something. But is, I think, a huge part of the balance that's needed, because people are wonderful that come forward and share information and present, but also you have to be susceptible to some degree of scrutiny or criticism, because you're in a public light. I think that it's really important to see that any normal degree of scientific development undergoes peer review and sometimes extreme scrutiny to make sure that we're not swaying or deviating from the pillars that help us understand how to discern what in reality. And I think that if we apply those same methods to a lot of this stuff, it becomes a lot more demystified, and that sometimes lets people down. And I get it. Like, people like things to be mysterious. They like the idea that there are great things happening beyond their personal reach to make sense of. All these great stories and claims and accounts that people have of things that normal people can't just readily go and check out sound really exciting. It sounds like something out of Hollywood or the movies or something like that. But it's really important to see how sometimes those things are happening because people have motives that aren't always in the best interest of people or the field that they're involved with, and that maybe sometimes people get wool pulled over their eyes in a way that they don't even realize. And I find that pretty unfortunate sometimes. And it's a reality. We can't be naive to that. The fact that not everyone has the best intentions. And I think for a while, my early involvement about 10 years ago, really getting into this very seriously, all of these different studies, I feel like I was a bit more naive to that. And then realizing later on, I feel maybe a bit more refined in my ability to address different things and to ask people. And you can see in a lot of my interviews, I'll ask people questions. I've asked notable figures, things that I think a lot of people would be hesitant or would think would be disrespectful. Not that I'm actually being disrespectful during the interview, like it's an altercation or anything, but I'm bringing up something that is absolutely relevant to the various degrees of perception about a particular instance or someone's background or involvement with something. And
can I ask what would
go ahead.
What would be the example that stands out in your mind that you have done that, and did you feel a qualm about doing so when it happened?
Well, I realize I'm putting myself in that position, but I think that it doesn't make me feel any worse if I get any criticism that's really like harsh and bad from feedback, comments, whatever. If I post something, or if it happens to the person, I've been able to tell a few times where things seem a little bit more uncomfortable, or there've been evasions, where everything was answered or responded to indirectly, almost to sort of redirect the flow of the conversation.
Yes.
Good examples of this would be like a notable one. People, this is probably one of the most iconic pieces of cinematography history, but the Patterson-Gimlin film, which is the picture, the few seconds of blurry footage of Bigfoot that everyone sees, the frame 352 image of both the hands swaying out and the head looking over toward them, the camera, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin. Well, I've interviewed Bob Gimlin a few times, and on one of those occasions, I just outright asked him, there are several accusations that not only are people seeing things differently in the film, but maybe that you don't remember what actually happened. How do you respond to that? And he, you can see that it's in one of my interviews on the Vortex, but I realized that he really did not want to directly speak on that and really kind of went off on another direction, which is telling in its own way.
Yes.
I think Bob's a great guy. I'm not trying to undermine him or his credibility per se, but whatever actually happened needs to be known. And so I think that's important. I think there's a lot of credence to that video, that film, but I think we still have to ask these questions. We would be naive not to. And so anyway, that's a prime example of someone. Another would be Rick Doty, who was a disinformation agent, counterintelligence officer working out of Edwards Air Force Base Detachment 3, otherwise known as what everyone is familiar with, Area 51.
Yes.
And so he was someone who officially was told to disinform a man called Paul Benowitz, who had seen different things and alleged crash debris that he thought was extraterrestrial. And basically, Rick Doty was instructed to tell him that it was, when it actually wasn't. It was ours, but they didn't want him to know that. They didn't want anyone to know that. Anyway, so I asked him in the interview about what people say about his involvement, how, knowing that was the case then, how there's anything relevant to what has to contribute now with other things, and if that really affects his ability to make sense of, interacting with various people at events and getting in altercations, because a lot of people really don't like him at all. Some people don't mind and can talk with him no problem. I thought it was an important opportunity while sitting with him to ask him those things, and so that's another example, because he had a big involvement with that case, and he seems like a knowledgeable guy. He's shared a lot of different things. I can't attest to his credibility, but I think that I think he thinks that he's convinced about a few things of whatever he shares, or is attempting to share things to the best of his knowledge. And there are other things that have happened before where I've asked different people Another good example is just recently with, someone who I've met and has known for several years now, Nick Pope, who
Yes.
Claims to have been part of the Ministry of Defense's
Yes.
UFO investigation project.
I've seen some of the articles about that.
Right, and so other people like Philip Mantle, publisher,
yes, seriously after it.
I've never met in person. I'm friends with him online. I think he's done some interesting and important things with his work. But I think that what he's highlighted in his view, and I think in others, is that it seems to be based upon documentation or whatever information they're using to suggest this, that maybe he didn't have the capacity of involvement that he claims to, as he's been recognized as this sort of Fox Mulder of the Ministry of Defense, spearheading the investigation into UFOs, when that might not have been the case whatsoever. And so, I'll ask him about things, not in an invasive way, but to allow him to respond to things that
I think that's important.
Of him. So,
yes.
if he's truthful and there's nothing to it, then it should be fine. But if it's not, then, he has an opportunity to respond in his own respect. And I think that being able to have the opportunity when you're talking with people is not just talking with them. I mean, anyone can go up and have a chat at an event, but when you're publicly doing or conducting an interview, like a lot of what I have on the Vortex,
yes,
it has a different effect, because I might prod or ask things that I'm not necessarily personally unaware of, or something that I'm suggesting, but it's more about allowing them to respond to the general sense of what is considered this or that according to people within, operating within these groups, these fields, things like that. So I think it's important that we can see if these things can be done to help us move forward. And if there's something to it, then great. If there's not, let's keep going. But I think that a lot of the focus has been shifted to personalities rather than content. The substance of the material that we're attempting to analyze should be paramount, rather than the sensationalized claims of figureheads and people who, are big draws at events and stuff like that. I think that it's important to have reputable people and people who can draw attention, because of course that's what touches the masses more than anything else. Unfortunately, we can't be naive to that. A lot of these shows, a lot of these different things, they generate interest, and we have to make sure that we continue to do that, but also in a way that
actually
doesn't distort the reality or the validity of information. And I think there have been a lot of charlatans. I think there have been a lot of people who have come forward and made claims that can't be substantiated, and it sounds very interesting, and they may come off as a really nice, kind person. That's totally different. But are they full of BS? Maybe not. But I think it's important to
really nice
that,
people sometimes are too.
Yeah, we have to think that not everyone out there is truthful about this stuff. And I think that as an investigator, you have to approach it level-headed and be careful not to fall into becoming a victim of something like that, even though we can't always be perfect. Sometimes it happens, and we just have to do what we can to move forward and just get the best information we can. I really like to be able to ask questions that I think people wouldn't normally be comfortable addressing, because it allows us to really get into things in a way that it provides transparency. I think a lot of shows bolster up their guests.
Yes.
And I mean, it makes sense. Obviously, you want to have a good, exciting show, but it's like you don't want to sometimes talk about the skeletons in the closet or things that really don't add up. You want to keep contributing to the things that sound awesome and get people and listeners and stuff like that. And it's something that we really have to make sure we, I think, are careful of. Are we trying to steer towards entertainment? Are we trying to steer towards, scientific advancement? Maybe a little of both.
Maybe a little of both, I think.
Yeah, it's not necessarily
there's
bad,
a balance.
It's got to be balanced.
Because you have to have a safe environment for them to come to have that conversation, and you don't want to be attacking when you're just trying to get information. Like the things with Nick. You know, it's just a question needs to be asked. I'm going to ask it. So please tell me. And I think how you deal with that is very good, because a lot of people are afraid because they're afraid they won't get the guests if they feel like they're going to be questioned uncomfortably, whatever. But you do that well.
And you know, I try not to make it the focus necessarily. You know,
right.
I could still have a good conversation and talk about several other things too. But
Yes.
you know, I think that if we can embed it in there tastefully, you know, and this is something that Jim, we were talking on the break, you know, Jim Mars, I learned a lot about how to, and you know, interview people in situations which otherwise are questionable at the minimum. You know, how we can really think about what we can do. And a good example is someone who he and I both got to interview together in one of our videos. And I actually asked him, I said, you know, this person I'm going to interview, I think that they could be deviating from really, you know, some pretty straightforward types of information that I think we just need to get a better idea about. And I think with you there, it would make them feel a little bit more comfortable, and you could help us, you know, set into, you know, a good flow of conversation with all of us, as well as we have a rapport. You know, we're sort of complementing each other, you know, being that we are all three sitting together in the room. It was just sort of a good discussion. But he also said, while we do that, you know, it's some of the tactics used can be deceptive, and we don't really want to put them in a place to where they feel like they're being cornered, where we're just going to start berating them. And that wasn't the case. But he was like, well, let me handle asking some of the straightforward things. A simple example would be asking where they were from, because they were never very clear. They always seemed to be in different areas. And I think this is a great person. They mean well, but they just, you know, were very ambiguous a lot of the time and weren't ever very direct. And that was the first time we really found out, like right there while we were doing it, that they were here from Texas, because they kept telling us other things. And so it was just one of the issues that we encountered was, okay, you know, this is how we're going to have to get to the point of the main or pertinent issues that I was really interested in covering, which I found out they didn't really want to cover. It was you know, for those who don't know, this is a video that the last one I got to do with Jim, unfortunately, but it was an interview with Sarah Adams, who has, you know, appeared on Gaia and other things. And she's really nice. I've spent a lot of time with her, and I think that she means well. She's probably misunderstood a lot of the times. She's someone who had relations with Max Spears, who died under, you know, alleged mysterious circumstances, which appeared in articles in like 2015. And that was something that caught a lot of attention in the media, became sort of viral. And that they were together for a long time, and she was the closest person to him at some point. And when my buddy and we found out that she was headed here to Dallas, to the Dallas area, we thought, wow, you know, at first this was just a strange story. Now it's actually tangible. Like this person's going to be accessible to us here in the area. Let's go interview them. Let's ask them the questions that other people are interested in, that she's being accused of, or that maybe she can provide insight to. It's not really just about, you know, arguing, but it's about understanding what can she tell us, what can she provide from the inside of that situation, you know. And she did.
We're going to have to take our break, because I want to know what she said. So we will be right back. Y'all come back too, because I'm going to tell you, Daniel, I am so pleased that you're here. This is my guest, Daniel Allen Jones, and we will be right back.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope.
That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
And we're back. Thank y'all for being here. Daniel, I interrupted you, and I apologize, but you found out that she was going to be accessible to you. You went to interview Sarah, and what was your result?
Well, like I said, Sarah's a great, fun person. I don't really have a problem with her at all or anything like that. The interview itself, I think, was a little bit disappointing. Most of the questions or things that we asked her weren't answered directly. There were a lot of evasions. The main point of the whole thing was to really get down to what happened to Max, and if she could really tell us anything. And I don't think we learned much at all. I think that it became sort of a sensational aversion that really, I think, was to highlight more about what she had going on and with stuff. And that's fine. But I think that looking back, I was more hopeful that we could really get into the whole issue with Max, which she really just wanted to avoid. Like I said, the whole point of explaining all of these things is that I don't necessarily mean to say this to give people the impression that I think that they're all liars or I don't like these people. I enjoy spending time with all the people who I just mentioned. Bob Gimlin, great guy. Rick Doty, I didn't mind sitting down and talking with him. I know a lot of people say whatever. I don't mind at all. I'm friends with him on Facebook. I see him do. We correspond sometimes. And then Sarah, I've seen Sarah probably more than most people that she's connected with online who have no idea how she's really like in person at all. And she's really, I think, someone who sometimes people can get the wrong impression of. But you know what? I don't mind. I don't mind them, and I hope all of those people are doing great and well right now because things are challenging for everybody. And like I said, the whole point of me expressing some of these things about interviewing people and really asking the pertinent questions about validity, about substantiating extraordinary claims. We have what's called the Sagan standard, which is extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. I think that for a lot of times people don't adhere to that, and not that that's the pinnacle of what we should adhere to, but it's something that we don't often utilize because we think that things sound nice and so they're agreeable and we'll just go with that. And we like these people, so their story must check out. That's not really how things work. It seems to be that that's what's happening, but it shouldn't really be that way in my view. But the whole point is to help provide some transparency to situations that are questionable, that have discrepancies, that are like big parts of what people are wondering about that can't always go out and talk to these people directly, like maybe we can at events and stuff. So the whole issue about interviewing people is to provide transparency. And this really draws full circle back to what you had asked a moment ago about the whole thing with UFOs.
Yes, that was Sherry Horsick's question.
Right.
It's just fascinating. But I do want to ask you to include something here because the terminology is being switched, and I find that to be the case often when the government gets involved and they want to have something phrased differently than within the community of the topic they're discussing. And in this case, they're calling them pyramids versus triangles. So another time, just like changing UFO to UAP, now they've changed, triangles to pyramids, which is different and outside the normal ufology experiencers phrase or description. So I did want to point out that this is like the second incident, just in passing, that this is being altered, and it will affect research later too, I think. And I think that might be a lot of what's going on. But the question was your opinion on the new news relevant to the photos released and confirmed by the Pentagon as not being ours. So what's your opinion on that?
Well, there's a lot that could be said, and there's a lot of different views about that from different parts of this whole field of ufology, people that contribute something to this. I think, it's important to see that this isn't necessarily new. My buddy Danny Silva wrote about this event, about these objects, drone-like objects appearing above the warships in 2019. He was one of the first people to cut the story. I've known Danny personally for several years now, and longer than that, before he was ever known for the Silver Record. And he's done a superb job of, I think, chronicling a lot of things. And it's thanks to people like him, like citizen journalists, citizen scientists, people going out of their way that aren't accredited, that aren't officials, that aren't military, that aren't government, and helping to provide transparency. I think that's where we're seeing a shift and understanding, becoming more aware, is that people aren't relying on the government so much anymore for some things. And I think that with this whole thing about the pyramid dilemma, well, when we talk about triangle UFOs, as far as UFO research goes, according to David Marler, who's a great guy, friend of mine, and someone I've seen a few times, I think that it's not very well known, but statistically, as far as what he's been able to tell, is that triangular UFOs are actually pretty commonplace, and that they actually rank pretty high up there as far as what people are seeing. The most common would be anomalous lights, amorphous or just strange lights. Then you, of course, would have disc-shaped objects, and then triangular-shaped objects sometimes would be parallel to that. And so people have been seeing the triangular ones apparently for a long time. Now, we have to remember, and this is basic geometry, the irony about this whole thing, and this is maybe just semantics, but if we're declaring them as such to be a pyramid, well, if you consider a traditional pyramid as a base with four sides that all come up to a pinnacle, well, that's not exactly what we're seeing in the video.
No.
The video allegedly shows basically equilateral triangle that, if you were to turn into some form of a pyramid, it would be what we call a tetrahedron.
Yes.
And if that is the case, maybe the pyramid is the easiest word to relate to that. Again, we're just splitting hairs at this point, but the whole idea is that I wanted to point out, if such an object with only three sides for the base were to come up to a point, that technically would be a tetrahedron, not a pyramid. I mean, you could say a tetrahedral pyramid, I guess. Anyway, beyond that, I think the point is the wording has always been different when it comes to any official documentation in any government or military. And I think that if we look at what Nick, like we were just saying, Nick Pope, what he said before, who, I think this is probably a valid statement. His assessment on these things is still something that, we have to consider. And he's a really nice guy too. So, he's always talked about how the term UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon, has been used in the British government instead of UFO, simply because it was more identifiable in a serious way, whereas UFO had sort of a pop culture baggage. And that's basically how he explains it. So if the other factions we can see in government use something to describe this, they're probably not saying UFOs a lot of the times, although some documents do say that. UAP is used often, but also we could consider that the use of AAV, Advanced Aerial Vehicle, is something that has been that's appeared in the New York Times as well. And I think it's important to consider that not everything being examined is going to be labeled as UFO, and maybe that's
Well,
to
I'm
help
pretty sure it's
with
not at all from this point, other than by people
Right.
who experience them.
Yeah, so I think that the terminology is probably an important thing to pay attention to, because now we have the UAP task force, which is embedded
Yes.
within
In the Navy.
Right. You know, we have now within this COVID bill that embedded within it was a declaration for intelligence agencies to release their information about UAP by June. And
Yes.
so if this happens, it could be monumental, or it could be nothing at all. And it's hard to say what exactly will happen. I'm not going to hold my breath, but I do think that there's something that will come of that deadline. And I think it has to do with butting heads in those factions of government and military. I think it has to do with what we understand about the position of UAP within the government and military, which is a defensive one. Again,
Yes.
my personal view is that it would be naive of us to not have that enveloped within a defensive structure or foundation within the military government, because, and I'm not suggesting that a lot of people, there are different viewpoints throughout the arena of ufology on this. A lot of people seem to think that the whole issue of how the government is looking at it is as a threat is total BS and nonsense, and is going to be used for this and that. Now, I don't deny that that's a possibility, but I also think that it's not as black and white as it's painted out to be. For instance, a friend of mine, Paula Harris, whose event I'll be at later this year as well, she's invited me to come back, and she's good friends with Dr. Stephen Greer, who I've done a conference call with. I've never met him in person, but I have talked to him personally before. And he is of the impression that anything that the military says about this is going to be a false flag and used to catalyze something. And I tend to think that there are good, valid points about that, but not that it's as simple as that. I think that it gives people a very extremist impression. And so you have contending factions, because some people think, okay, well, if he's telling the truth, then groups like ATIP, the Pentagon's UFO investigation program, or at least one of them that we know about publicly, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, if this is going on, some people think, and headed by Lou Elizondo, who I have met and talked with about this, he seems to be someone who is concerned about not just defense secrecy from adversaries, people in other places in the world, rogue nations and things. So in some way, not in any way extraterrestrial threats or problems, but mainly to understand the phenomenon beyond nuts and bolts objects, because this is a big part of what we're learning in many circles. This is kind of what's ironic, is all these different factions or groups that are seeming to be contending viewpoints are somewhat building toward the same notion that this UFO phenomenon is not a singular one. It's not necessarily a mere physical one, that there are greater components to this and what's happening than we understand at present. And we're learning a lot, but what we see with some of these different situations is that people get the impression that what the government says is total nonsense, and that we can't trust them at all. And I think that there are good people in the military and government who have no ill will toward anyone.
I agree.
There are some who absolutely do as well. I think it's like we said, it's not as simple.
Well, it's like every field.
Group.
You have the naysayers and the ones that think this is important and have to keep up, keep it covered.
Yeah.
But we have to go to a news break. So I can't believe this time is flying so much. I am enjoying this conversation. You are something else. So we are going to go now for our news break. This is a great time to fill your tea glass, your beer stein, your wine glass, whatever floats your boat. We will be back with Daniel, and we have so many questions in chat. We will get to those, I promise. So y'all come back.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Womply. Womply is committed to helping self-employed workers and small businesses get their PPP loan. Application determines eligibility. Apply for free at womply.com/NPR.
Live from NPR News, I'm Janine Herbst. Half of all adults in the U.S. have received at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine shot. NPR's Joel Rose reports that milestone comes as the country prepares to open vaccination to all adults tomorrow.
Almost 130 million people 18 or older have received at least one dose so far, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the vaccine supply continues to climb, despite a pause in the use of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine after a small number of women developed blood clots. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the president's chief medical advisor, expects a CDC advisory panel to make a decision about the vaccine this week.
My estimate is that we will continue to use it in some form. I doubt very seriously if they just cancel it. I don't think that's going to happen.
Speaking on NBC, Fauci said the panel would likely recommend a restriction or warning with the single-dose vaccine. Joel Rose, NPR News.
In California, vigils are being held tonight by members of the state's Sikh community for the 8 people killed in a shooting at a FedEx facility in Indianapolis last week. From member station KQED, Julie Chang has more.
4 of those killed Thursday night at the FedEx warehouse were Sikhs. Nandeep Singh, executive director of the Jakara movement, says the Sikh community in California has been deeply affected by the shooting.
A lot of them have a lot of connections in California. Many of them had resided in California for years. So it was a groundswell of, the community just feeling a loss, a mourning.
Singh says many friends and relatives of the Indianapolis warehouse workers contacted him immediately after reports of the shooting. The vigils are being held across the state, including in the state capital, Sacramento. For NPR News, I'm Julie Chang in San Francisco.
In Austin, Texas, police are searching for a 41-year-old former sheriff's deputy in connection with the fatal shooting of 3 people. Interim Police Chief Joseph Chukan says they consider this a domestic incident, but says there's no risk to the general public. But
he is still at large. We do think that he is armed, and he is very much dangerous.
Police had issued a shelter-in-place order around where the shooting took place, but have since lifted it, but also say people should remain vigilant. Chacon says they are now conducting a fugitive search. No word yet on a motive. In Wisconsin, police say they have apprehended a man wanted in connection with a shooting at a bar in Kenosha that left 3 people dead, 3 others injured. Kenosha County Sheriff's Department spokesman Sergeant David Wright says the suspect is facing a charge of first-degree intentional homicide and that additional charges are likely. Earlier, authorities say the suspect was asked to leave the Summers House Tavern but returned and opened fire. U.S. futures contracts are trading lower at this hour. You're listening to NPR News. European Union foreign ministers are expected to discuss the Czech Republic's allegations that Russian agents were involved in a deadly explosion of stored ammunition in 2014. Terry Schultz reports the Czechs expelled 18 Russian diplomats over the matter, and Russia followed suit.
The Czech government says the EU and NATO have been informed about the investigation that links Russian intelligence to the explosion which killed 2 people. Czech police are now searching for 2 men they say were in the country before the 2014 blast who used passports in the same names as those accused of poisoning former Russian spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter in the UK in 2018. NATO is expressing solidarity with the Czech Republic and calling these malign activities part of a Russian pattern of dangerous behavior. Moscow rejects the accusations and expelled 20 Czech diplomats Sunday in response. For NPR News, I'm Terry Schultz in Brussels.
In South Africa, a wildfire burning on the slopes of Cape Town's Table Mountain spread to the University of Cape Town, burning the historic campus library and forcing evacuations. That library houses considerable archives and book collections. Other campus buildings also caught fire, and a historic windmill nearby burned. More than 100 firefighters are battling both the wildfire fueled by dry brush and the fire on campus. 4 helicopters are dropping water on threatened areas, and 1 firefighter has been injured. I'm Janine Herbst, and you're listening to NPR News.
Welcome back for the second hour of Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate magazine. You know, we have been in publication since 1948. Our website is fatemag.com, and if you need to renew your subscription or just start one, that is where you go to do so. You can also get archives. You can get your newest edition. And we even have some fantastic T-shirts that you can get on there too. And I will say that I do have one, and it is so comfy cozy. So definitely check it out. But mainly, I had a guest who had written an article and did not know that it had been published and was always wondering what had happened, why it wasn't. I mentioned it after the show to our editor, Phyllis, and she said, well, that did publish. And she knew exactly when and what edition. Said, get me the snail mail and send them out to her. Send her a couple of copies. So you just never know what you're going to find. Now, we are back with just a wonderful guest. I hope y'all are enjoying him as much as I am. And it's Daniel Allen Jones. He is out of Texas. He is the host, editor, and producer of the Vortex and the author of the Mythological Operating System. I almost got that wrong again. So I am so glad, Daniel, that you are here. And just know that you're about to be inundated with questions. And that's okay, because you've got answers.
Yeah. Well, see,
Now,
I mean, I'm always open for what people would like to ask about or share about. So, yeah, I'm definitely down for any questions. And I know we were just finishing up. So, yeah, go ahead and lead us into that.
Well, this is a question that I think is interesting because you always hear stories about this kind of thing, but Sherry wants to know, are there stories of disappearances of some people that told the true story of aliens, Bigfoot, etc., like someone took them out because they knew too much truth? Have you ever heard of that being a real situation?
Well, it's interesting. I've known Travis Walton for several years.
Yes.
I've personal conversations and have done interviews with him. He disappeared for 5 days, but he showed back up. Apparently. So I think that's kind of interesting to consider why he showed back up. If all these people are disappearing, I'm sure some of the listeners probably know about the whole 411 missing persons issue. Well, if something like this happened to Travis Walton and he did disappear and then he was taken back 5 days later, what's going on with some of the other people that are taken, if they are taken? They just disappeared.
Do you think it was the eyewitnesses?
As far as Travis's case goes,
that someone saw him taken, although they were about to be prosecuted, but
right, they were going to be charged with murder, and that actually kind of saved them whenever he did show back up. I think that something did happen to Travis. I think something anomalous did happen. There are some people out there. I mean, he's a sincere guy, and I think something shook him up for sure. But I think that there are people out there that do think that it's a hoax. And to me, that's interesting because I look at a lot of these things and not just the content of the research, but also the researchers themselves, the communities themselves.
Yes.
They take an anthropological approach and see what the cultures are like that are involved with these things. And what we do see is that people mostly tend to find him believable, likable, which is great. He is a nice guy. I've met him several times. But then, yes, you can't ignore that there are some people who think the whole thing was hoaxed and that maybe it was just made up. I think that, and that's not me saying that, but that's just me pointing out that there is a faction of people, right? right? So we can't be naive to those things. Sometimes people say, well, let's not tend to focus on the negative. It's like, well, we're not really being negative by saying that. These are things that need to be questioned. So when it comes to Travis, he did disappear, but he was brought back. A lot of people seem to think that the missing persons 411, 411 reports seem to be linked to the Bigfoot phenomenon.
Yes.
I think that it's hard to try to identify an already complex phenomenon by attempting to use another unexplained issue to do so. I don't know that it really helps. It sounds curious, but I don't know that it helps us, let's say, pinpoint the issue. But there's a story of Phil Schneider, who apparently knew too much about, he claims all this stuff about being at Dulce Base and having the firefight, and then was apparently committed suicide under mysterious circumstances. I never met him, but I think that people conspiratorially consider that he was offed or that he was killed. I have a lot of people ask me, did they, in regard to Jim Mars, they say, did they get him? Who was it? Why'd they do it? What did what's going on? It's like, well, because he's renowned for writing books about conspiracy theories.
Yes,
so
he is.
it just makes sense to some people to suggest that it had to be a conspiracy theory that he was killed or something. And it's not that crazy sometimes. It's really just a matter of, this is what happened. As interesting as it would be for some strange psyop, cover up, false flag, whatever you want to say, to have taken place, it was really just a matter of, for Jim's sake, liver failure, dialysis, and old age, and just a lot of contributing factors. And he was being monitored for sure. I mean, he was at this for a long time. He was writing. He was writing on these different things for years before people really, before modern things like the internet, YouTube, social media, before people could be tracked online in that capacity. He was already, writing about this stuff for a long time. So anyway, I think the point of the whole disappearances about stories of aliens, I think that people tend to chalk things up to something strange in an attempt to explain mysterious circumstances, like the whole idea of Max Spears dying. They thought it had something to do with him, being a UFO hunter or conspiracy theorist, or that someone he knew too much. And I don't think that was the case at all. I think he was a neglected person who probably used a lot of drugs and overdosed and died. And that's as simple as what Sarah could have said in the interview. But of course, that doesn't sound nice. That doesn't make for good entertainment and ratings for some people. But that's what happened, and that's what could have been done and said very simply. And I think with situations like that, we realize that, more times than not, there probably are not a lot of stories that check out that involve some of these really incredible things. I'm not denying that it doesn't exist or that, these things don't happen, but I'm just saying we need to use our discernment and realize that, we shouldn't believe everything we hear and see and that we are finding out on shows and stuff, because a lot of times it's sensationalized. And I think that the disappearances are really, really important, because that affects people. That affects families, friends, and that's a real issue. This isn't about necessarily, could it also have been that aliens took him? And it's like, well, that's interesting, but that's almost a disservice to the family, because you're focusing more on something that is not a tangible part of, a mysterious death or something, or disappearance. It's like, yeah, I get it. I like to focus on those things too, but we have to understand the relevance of an issue. When it comes to something with those things, I think it's important to see that if there is something we can follow up that is suggestive that something extraordinary or exotic took place, then we have to see what kind of ways to follow up with that make sense. If it's just purely speculation, then we have to ask ourselves, is it really worth tagging on the extra baggage of something already unfortunate to try to make it that much more complicated? I think a lot of times people, when they go missing in the woods or going different places, you do have what are called MILABs, or MIL labs, military abductees, military abductions. I would say that it seems like this is a reasonable thing to suggest could be happening. I've talked with Melinda Leslie and a number of other people who seem to think that this is a really big deal and that it's affecting a lot of people. I think there's something to it. I don't know necessarily that it can be proven or openly confirmed, like we're hearing from these things with the UFO reports, UAP, stuff like that. But imagine them saying, yes, we've been taking people, or we know that someone's been taking people. It would be very far-fetched to think that any official agency would ever come out openly to say that. So I don't know that if aliens or Bigfoot could contribute some portion to why people disappear. Sure, I don't know what that portion or percentage would be, and the totality of missing people reports and mysterious disappearances. But we can factor in that maybe for some portion of those people, we could account maybe that something exotic did happen, and maybe some of them are military abductees. Maybe some of them just got died from natural causes and eaten by bears or mountain lions or something, which absolutely does happen when you're out miles out in the wilderness, which I have been. And I think it's important to think about how some of these people may still be alive, maybe not, but that usually it's probably because of something overlooked, or it's not always as complicated as we make it. We also have to consider Occam's razor. What's the most simplified, basic explanation as to why something could potentially happen? More times than not, that might be the answer,
Yes. Well, we have another question, and we don't have very much longer before we get a break, but this is rather straightforward. But do you feel that, do you believe that you've seen an actual UFO or had an experience?
Well, yes and no. And then yes as well. And what I mean by that, I'll in a nutshell, because these are loaded questions, and as simple as some people could just say, yes, I did. It looked like this, and that was it. I don't ever claim to have necessarily seen a UFO in the same regard as some people have, that is their springboard into this issue. For me, it wasn't, I had an experience or I had a sighting and then I got involved with all this. For me, it wasn't necessarily like that. I definitely have seen some things that I don't know what they were, mysterious things in the sky. And, for instance, more, I guess, tangent from that, like a simple example is, I've seen the Marfa lights a number of times, and I don't know what that is.
No.
Is it a UFO? Yes, it's not identified. It is aerial. It's flying. It's not way up in the sky, but it's not like rolling around on the ground or something. It's not a car. So I don't know what that was. But as far as like a daylight disc, I don't claim to have seen anything like that. Maybe I have, but not to my recollection. I ever make a point to say that that's a big thing for me. I think that I have seen some strange things. I've seen some strange things with Melinda Leslie out at night vision, or using night vision. I don't know what it was. I don't presume that it was an alien spaceship. And I always press people to think that we can't always relate the word UFO to alien spaceship, because that's not.
Were you in Sedona?
No, we were in Laughlin, Nevada.
Okay.
And we had a group there that we went out. But for the other part, the experiencers now, or the experience, I think, based upon what I understand, I'll try to keep this succinct because I know we're getting close to the break. I think based off of my utilization of medicinal therapy, that I have found the ways in which we interact with other forms of consciousness or intelligence in our own way have allowed me to open my perception to the possibility that some of the things that I've had happen earlier at earlier stages in my life may be indicative that I had an ongoing form of, let's say, interaction or experience through interfacing with some outside or other form of intelligence. Now, I don't know, I can't say that that was an alien. I don't know exactly what it was or how it operates, but I do know that it's inspiring, that it presents itself through symbols, through imagery, through things within our subconscious, within our dreams. And a lot of this was something I realized through the use of ayahuasca and dimethyltryptamine or DMT, which I don't mind mentioning at all. I think some people stray away from admitting some of those things, but to me, it's an important part of this whole understanding. So that's where I am with that, is that it has been something I feel like I've connected with in a particular way.
Well, let's talk about that when we come back, if you're up for that.
Let's do it.
Okay, we'll be right back. Y'all come.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Paratalk Radio is your one-stop for all things paranormal, the unknown, and the supernatural. Join us every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central for discussions and guests on topics such as ghosts, hauntings, Bigfoot, UFOs, and more. This broadcast is rated M for mature and intended for listeners over 16 on paratalkradio.com.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope.
That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experienced here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate Magazine. I'm so pleased that you are here, and if you missed that first hour, no fear, because you can get it in our archives. We are everywhere that you have get your podcasts. We are iHeart and iTunes, and we are Google Apps. We are also things like Deezer. So if somebody wants to get spinning a show, you can just spin us right in with your tunes, as well as GeoSavan. So that is like the Indian equivalent of iHeart. So there you go. We're not kidding when I say everywhere. But I am so glad, Daniel, that you are my guest tonight, and I am having such a good time. And I interrupted you, and I apologize.
That's okay.
Were you done?
Well, we were talking about experiences, and I
Yes,
was
and
really just
you were talking about the unusual. To me, that sounds like an unusual experience, and I wanted you to go into further detail on that, if you don't mind, with the
I guess
DHT and.
sure. So yeah, we were kind of getting into the second part of that question earlier about if I've had experiences, and essentially the easy way to explain it is that I would say yes, but maybe not in the way that people would typically think, oh wow, he's he's seen an alien or something. It's not that I want to give people that impression. Although I do kind of sometimes make light of that when I ever share a picture of myself, sitting next to an alien, like I'm saying, I finally get this, I've been waiting to do this interview or something. Anyway,
Right.
so
I
the
love
whole
that part
point
of you,
is
though.
that experiences are different for everyone in different ways. And this really ties back into, if some people think that we're dealing with an alien phenomenon, a ghostly or spectral phenomenon, some sort of interdimensional phenomenon, whatever forms that intelligence can take are going to be beyond our confines and our definitions of it. Until we can really scientifically understand it, we're going to have to kind of rely upon these experiences that people have and just document it and not necessarily just say, well, it was an alien. Unless, there's something that really gives them that indication, I guess. But I think people write off experiences and use those sort of as umbrella terms to try to understand something that they don't really know themselves, but it just seems or sounds good to say it was a ghost or it was an alien or something like that. But for myself personally, anyways, is that I realized that later on I would remember situations throughout times when I was younger where I would know a presence or experience a presence. I'll just say that. And it would be indicative through understanding certain symbols or imagery. And it would sometimes come as forms of, I would say, maybe just strings of words or something, but not necessarily like I would have an ongoing conversation with, like I said, sitting with an alien. It was never anything like that. But it gave me the impression as I looked back after going through different medicine ceremonies and utilizing medicinal therapy, having taken ayahuasca, having utilized dimethyltryptamine or DMT. These things are what it seems that our pineal gland produces, which is what ancient traditions refer to as the third eye, that allow us to project into a greater scope of our conscious awareness, integrating that into third-dimensional material reality, and then what might lie beyond that in other ways to show us that the veil is lifted and that there are forms, there are things, entities, and stuff happening all around us at all times that we aren't normally tuned into. And I think that's what really opened my eyes, was that I wasn't necessarily, maybe you could say, under the impression that there were just aliens or I was abducted or something like that, but that through those interactions as I was growing up, and then things that had happened throughout that time, gave me the impression that perhaps that presence was a form of consciousness or intelligence that was not my own. And
right.
I don't like to say exactly what that was because I don't know. I don't want to tell people it's an alien or that it was a ghost, because that doesn't seem like, it's a sound thing to assess. And I don't know that I can exactly pinpoint what some of those things were, but through my experiences, like having had ayahuasca ceremony, I felt like I was interacting with extremely profound entities and beings, and I didn't ever really get the impression to say that they were necessarily alien, but they definitely were not something that was simply a physical aspect. And that really allowed me to sort of tune in more to the notion that these things that we call extraterrestrials or ghosts or spirits, or whatever it is, if there is something there, that it exists in some way that might not always be tangible to our physical sciences or knowledge, and that maybe it might expand beyond that in a way that operates at a different level. And that's also something that I really touch upon in Mythos, is that we understand the tip of the iceberg, and maybe not even that, but maybe what we do know can lend us insight about all the things that are down there below the water at the bottom of the iceberg that's all not seen. And that through the use of altering our perception, whether we induce that naturally, organically, or through substances like dimethyltryptamine, which is present in nature and in ourselves, then perhaps we can see a little bit more of what's going on with that iceberg, or the spectrum or continuum of whatever we live in that we call reality, our world, our collective understanding of the world, our mythos, right? Our mythical operating system. And so
Yes.
when we understand that the agents that interact within this system aren't always going to be biological entities, that's been the most insightful experience I would say I have come to terms with. So take that however you will, but I think that's the way I have to answer that question, because it's not as simple as just yes or no sometimes. But it's a good question, because I think most people have probably had something like that, and it just didn't occur to them in a way that we just think, oh, we're just going to see a little green man, or just whatever, a big angel come up to us or something, and then we know for sure that that's what it is. It's not always like that, and I think that we suppress experiences and memories that don't fit in, and we filter them out because it doesn't make sense, and it's easier for our mind to operate that way, though our consciousness has definitely experienced something anomalous. I really feel like that's a pretty sound thing that takes place in a lot of people's lives.
I would agree with that, and I find it interesting that several people that I know have done that have done that ceremony, and every person has shared an experience not unlike yours, all of course very personal and very deep to themselves, but that intensity, that like you're interacting with another level of consciousness, and it's almost like the experience is bringing you up to it, and the communication is brilliant. So I find that really interesting, Daniel. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, me too. It's a primary focus in my publication, because to me, all of these interactions that we have, that we're really finding out, is not only a big part of our perception of these anomalous experiences, these strange encounters, this unusual phenomena that we see everywhere around the world. And in some way, it has to do with our consciousness, our perception, again, our mythos, our mythical operating system. If you go back 1,000, even just 1,000 years, people see the world totally different based upon how their societal structure works, the lenses of perception they think about or use, whether it's a religious one, whether it's a survival one, anything. And it's not just us as human people, but it's also animals. We have to think about what degree of perception does an animal, any animal, a plant, an insect, have that maybe we do or don't also have. Where does it overlap? Obviously, we interact within the same material medium, but perhaps there could be something vastly beyond that doesn't overlap in our same interaction on this medium. And maybe if that's in a form of intelligence, then it's going to be outside of our normal sense of perception. And if we somehow expand that to overlap, we become aware of it. Maybe that's not intended by them. Maybe we do things to access those forms without them really choosing for us to perceive them. Maybe some of the things that we experience are based upon our own ability to perceive them rather than their willingness for us to perceive them. And I think that's a big part. I mean, I would think that if there's an advanced form of consciousness or intelligence that it could easily manipulate us or our ability to perceive them if they choose. Sometimes we have to consider that maybe the opposite is also taking effect, where we're doing things that maybe we weren't normally supposed to, or that happened unexpectedly, and then suddenly we come upon things. So if you delve into people's experiences utilizing dimethyltryptamine, and find out that you have what people refer to as the machine elves, which is simply more nomenclature for some form of embodied consciousness that is similar to how people describe what we see in Fae lore or paranormal activity or aliens of the subject of UFOs and things like that. And so I think that they're all just different names we use in an attempt to try to identify a form of interaction that we have with something outside of ourselves. And when people utilize something like DMT, they experience these machine elves working on the machinations of reality that we don't normally see and that we can access in that state. It's almost like the movie The Matrix. When Neo is really accessing his powers, he starts to see the green matrix grid, right?
Right.
That's going to be something that I think people have as the easiest sort of social icon to relate to this stuff, is that movie, because it sort of set a new standard for our understanding of what is possible. What is reality? What is it constructed of? And how is our consciousness an integral part of that? And can it be pliable? Is what we do here going to affect the environment, our collective medium that we interact with? Are there things that we can do to alter that? And what degree can we? Are we regular users of this system, or are we power users? Do we have administrative capabilities? Can we do things that maybe we haven't really realized in our modern paradigm that maybe we once did in ancient times?
Right.
There are a lot of questions that open up about how to manipulate reality based upon conscious awareness of the elements, laws of physics, laws of nature. I think we've lost a great deal of knowledge based upon looking at a lot of these ancient sites around the world, these archaeological anomalies.
I would totally agree with that.
And that's something that, should clue us in that we knew something really important about how to manipulate the elements, and we've lost touch with that. And we seem to kind of have a splinter in our mind that makes us always wonder. We're seeing and experiencing something we knew about at one point. We just can't figure out what exactly we did. And I think to really just to chalk it all up to aliens and say, well, it must have been aliens. It does a disservice to, our ancestors. I think it dishonors them because they were brilliant, and we had a lot that we knew about that we've lost touch with. And it's not always going to be something that aliens had to do with. It may just been that base of knowledge has become dissolute, and we are having to tap back into that based off of genetic memory or super advanced technology. So that's kind of what I think.
What do you think could have been catastrophic enough to cause that collective memory to be lost? Do you think it was... The flood was not that long ago, so I don't think it would have been that. What do you feel like it could have been?
Well, there are probably a number of contributing factors because of the way that people operate in groups. It's just like the idea of evolution. People, generally speaking, throw that term around and don't really understand how the working theory of evolution works, or as a process scientifically. So let me liken it to that by saying that groups of people or a species evolve. An entire species doesn't necessarily evolve all at once into something new or different. What happens is you have alterations, you have adaptations, you have assimilations within pockets of a species or a group of people. And through that, the genetic buildup is altered and it coalesces with other groups. And so I would say that based upon what we understand genetically we're finding out that we've experienced several mass extinctions worldwide for a very long time, it seems.
True.
And I think that what could have led to our sense of not really being able to remember, and this is something I think Graham Hancock says really well. He sort of coined a phrase, which I did a little video with him, and I had him share about this, is that we are a species with amnesia.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to forget these incredible things that we've once been in touch with, and then we've lost a great deal of understanding about how these things work and how we can get that back. So I think that there could have been something, a catalyzing effect that has prevented us from remembering, and I think it has something to do with our genetics. I think that memory is not necessarily confined to brain activity or brain chemistry, but is also a big part of our genetic makeup.
Absolutely.
And is also stored in other parts of the body as well, in organs and in limbs. And I think that it's important to think about how that can affect our understanding of things down the line for generations to come. So if we continue to what we would call direct our own evolution, directed evolution, something that Richard Dolan, an incredible preeminent researcher for ufology, someone who I've also interviewed as well, he talks about directed evolution as a way that we're going to really start kind of paving the way for where we're going to go physiologically, genetically, biologically. Maybe we're going to incorporate some form of metabiology or something that would help us understand non-physical aspects of our world, whether they are digital or whether they are pre-existing aspects which we have not yet really discovered scientifically, or that we're just kind of getting into, that people refer to in spiritual circles. So, and this is, people talk about the Akashic records or different things that seem to already exist that we can access through metaphysical means. If we continue to direct our evolution with high degrees of technology, and some people are against this, some people don't like the idea of merging. I'm not necessarily saying that this is what I advocate, but we can't be naive that there is a great deal of things that will happen in the next maybe 10 years. I mean, we're not even talking 100 years. We're talking
it's not very far off. It's already begun. But
so I focus on a lot of this with my publication because it's a big part. The singularity, AI, advanced technology, and how that's going to change the way we understand reality in the next several generations.
Well, we have to go to break. I have more questions, but we will ask them when we come back. And if you have questions, this is going to be our final segment coming up, so go ahead and get them in the chat room. We will see you on the flip side.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but...
Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
This is Jason Bland, host of Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup, where we stream live as a webcast every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern, with guests who will blow your mind. Live ghost box sessions where you can call into the show to see if the spirits will talk to you, and the World Wide Web of Weird with the latest in paranormal news and evidence. We're bringing the weird every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow and subscribe.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 45 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back for the final segment of this episode of Fate Mag Radio. I am so glad you're here because Daniel has just been a gift. And Daniel, can you tell people the best way to get in touch with you? Because I know there are going to be questions coming out of this interview.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kat. So it's basically something you can go to on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube. My name is Daniel Allen Jones, and that's how you can look me up. On YouTube, you can go to The Vortex. If you type in, if you're in the browser, youtube.com/The Vortex, and then the number 1. And you can see a lot of the videos that I've made on there, interviews, lots of on-site, on-location segments, and then presentations, full lectures on several topics. So I really enjoy being able to provide that and share it openly with people, as a resource and just as something they can garner in their own interest. And Facebook is a good way to get in touch with me as well. I have several groups on there: Texas UFO Network, Texas Cryptozoology Network, and the Vortex is on Facebook too. Instagram, I just like to share pictures and photographs and stuff that I have. And if they'd like to email me, it's just my name @hotmail.com. So feel free to let me know if you have any questions. I like to hear from everyone's input, and that's something I always enjoy too.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because I do know that people are going to want to learn more. Now, when we left, we were talking about basically collective consciousness, collective memories. And we were talking during the break, and it's just fascinating. This whole topic, to me, is very fascinating. We were talking about integrated intelligence. And then we started talking about the Akashic Records, which would be considered to be a collective memory bank. And people access this all the time. And I have studied this. This is actually one of my favorite topics. But I have not been singularly successful in accessing as I would like to. But the fact that that's there and available is something that I find fascinating. I love that you brought this into the conversation.
Yeah, I think that after, like you said, and that you've done as well, studying several different modalities of metaphysical world, I think that you see some similar traits, all around, but this is one that has kind of become more prominent, is this idea that there's a place, like a location, or not necessarily just a
library,
physical place, but like you said, a library that you can access. And I think that what we're finding is that if these places or things that are alleged to exist metaphysically are out there or here, wherever it is, I think that it's important to realize that with the advancing forms of technology and our continued development in our own awareness, because we are technology as well, we're organic technology. I think that, and we're talking about directed evolution, how we're going to essentially be able to see how we want to continue evolving, continue developing physiologically, technologically, metaphysically, whatever it is we need to do that is allowing us to understand a grander scope of our world or nature. That's going to lend us insight about some of these otherwise mythical concepts, which is a big part of why I call my publication Mythical Operating System, because sometimes we're told that these things, these concepts, these places, experiences, encounters, all of this stuff is all imaginary, or it's not really real. It's just something, it's a figment of, our imagination, or it's not exactly something tangible. It just is a hallucination. And I don't deny that, sometimes people can have that happen.
Yes.
But if there is any shred of truth to any of this stuff, that we will make those things detectable within our near future scientifically. And I think that's a really important thing, because some people they're like, science isn't really going to matter. It's all about our spiritual evolution. And I've been in the metaphysical community for years.
Yes.
I think that there's a lot of great work. People mean well, but I think there's a lot of naivete with the idea that science is somehow an entity or a bad thing. I think, if anything, the tools through which the scientific lens provides lends us insight into greater spiritual awareness than in any other capacity, because it's something that will eventually allow the greater portion of the public or our communities to have a basis for understanding. Just like we talked about with the microscope. Before the advent of the microscope, people didn't really know about germs and bacteria.
Yes.
But now that we do, it's commonplace. If we allow for science to envelop the lowest common denominator in our society about things which otherwise people may still be aware of at present, or have been for millennia, we're going to use that in a way that helps to elevate that understanding to a new sense of what is accepted or normal. So let's say if we have powerful things that we can engineer that can access those records, or access things that supposedly have information waiting for us to get and to understand. A good example is the mythical story of the 13 crystal skulls from ancient times, around the world.
Yes.
I've been able to be with at least 2 of those supposed skulls, and to me, I think it's very fascinating. I'm a student of archaeology, and I think that if there is anything to these ideas of what people say about these skulls being made or brought by aliens, or being made by advanced ancient cultures here to give us tools for learning, then if that is so, then we can access that using not only our own organic technology as we continue to develop, which people, I would say, perhaps they can now and have been able to, but not everyone can. Not everyone's out there using telepathy. Not everyone's out there using psychokinesis. These aren't things that are commonplace and are probably very rare or not really common at all. So if we think about, if we are able to continue utilizing those by integrating our engineering, our medical technology, things that allow a greater sense of perception of our reality and of nature and of those different dimensions and spiritual things, then maybe we can unlock what potentially could be hidden away within said crystal skulls, if that even could happen, if that even is what's supposed to, they're supposed to be. So for me, it's really important to think about how the future will hold a lot of answers for us under the appropriate circumstances. And I'll share, I know we're coming here to the close pretty soon, but I wanted to share some papers that are included in my publication that really hit upon this in great detail, citing scientific papers and different work done by various figures. And I'll just share the titles. One, the archaeological one, is titled "The Discovery of Hidden Structures Designed by Ancient, or rather Advanced Non-Human Intelligence, Developing Detection Methods for Xenoarchaeology, Cryptocultures, and Occulted Civilizations." And that gets into the discovery of things that are present, like possibly the Akashic Records, or things that aren't typically a physical form of detection. Archaeology is not simply confined to the physical realm, and we'll find out through using digital archaeology and other forms that we're doing now, which is very cutting edge. And additionally, the anthropological research proposal that I published is called "The Anthropological Implications of Advanced Civilizations and Developing Techniques to Interface with Non-Human Intelligence." So these basically get into some of the modalities that are known in the circles of metaphysics, of ufology, of the paranormal, the things that are attempted to be used to initiate some form of interface with these disembodied entities, or maybe they are embodied. And then you also have maybe what can be developed technologically through scientific advancements to really make a clear, stable, demonstrable connection. Whereas like a lot of these things you see on ghost shows or anything, people attempting CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, like human initiated alien contact.
Yep.
These are not surefire ways and methods to which this can be accomplished. More times than not, they don't work. It takes several attempts using extremely articulated, fine-tuned methods and repetitions to make anything possibly happen, which, some people say, oh, it'll work every time. Every time we go to this place, we always get something. And it's like, well, no, that's absolutely not the case at all. And because of this, it's not to say it's wrong or that's bad, but it shows us that we don't have a consistent way of interfacing with these non-human intelligences. We need to develop something that can do it every single time. That's not going to be up in the air type of thing. It should be as clear as the government coming out and saying yes, as clear as they've come out and said that yes, UFOs are real. We need to have something that's as clear as saying yes, we can contact non-human intelligence. Not like, oh, we did one time, we thought we did, but every time we tried, it just didn't. We couldn't figure it out. And it's not going to be a flip of the switch. I think it's going to be an ongoing thing. Look at all of our technology. Every year is a new model.
Yeah.
Bigger, better, faster, stronger, whatever it is. I think that, that's a whole rabbit hole itself, but I think that with advancing forms of technology and in general artificial intelligence, there's going to be a lot that we will understand. And even Elon Musk, he's one of the biggest ways that we'll have any opportunity to continue advancing. There's people that have the resources like he does and the altruism, hopefully, that he does to make the things happen, because the government's not going to make it happen. I mean, NASA's relying on him and SpaceX to send astronauts out. A government-funded program can't get the job done. We're relying on people with the money that can, and it's thanks to people in that position that are even considerate to fund programs that can do things like Neuralink. A lot of people think that that's evil and all this stuff too, but unless something totally crazy happens to stop all of this, these things are coming. These things are going to be part of reality.
And they're saying
instead that a paraplegic person can send a message faster than a person with thumbs by using these technologies. This is going to revolutionize everything for us.
People are afraid of change, though. They'll fight it all the way.
That's Stockholm syndrome, and it
is. Absolutely it is.
It will persist, and it will not be an easy transition. Revolutions never are. If we've learned anything from history, there's going to be a very interesting stratification that's going to happen. And I think you're going to have people who are only going to stick to what they consider organic, natural modes of living, whichever that is for them, and there's going to be people who are all about the singularity and technology. And the thing is I'm not necessarily advocating either of those positions by drawing attention to them. That's really what I'm doing. I'm drawing attention to the
awareness is a good thing to start thinking.
I think that either way, what we're doing naturally is very important. What we're doing technologically, I think, is also very important. But I don't want people to get the impression that I'm here to try to push the, the AI agenda or something. Like, I'm just sharing that this is happening. This is a torrent that we will not be able to stop. This is Pandora's box, and unless we get our act together, we have to really make sense of what we're getting ourselves into. When we have the contrast of extreme technology with low technology or things that could otherwise be super helpful to eliminate famine, strife, civil unrest, all of that stuff should not really have even been something happening when we can do all this other crazy things like go out to the stars. I think it's really important to see that these are probably going to be ongoing struggles for as long as there will be people, is that we have to try to unite, but it's not just going to be suddenly, the next day type thing. We really have to understand how to get together and make sense of what we're getting ourselves into. And I think that there's a lot to discuss. There's a lot that we have to question. And that's really what a lot of my publication is postulates,
yes,
propositions, just getting to the point of what we need to address when we are at the brink of huge changes and at the precipice of the next phase of our place in reality.
Well, of our existence. It is a phase of existence. And that's not a bad thing. But Daniel, we are out of time. I have so much enjoyed you being here. Thank you.
Kat, it's been amazing. It's just gone by so quick, hasn't it?
It has. Considering that we got a late start, thank you for helping me battle through the gremlins by hanging in there with me. So, gremlins, they just, I hate when I get them wet, man. I do. But I do want to just tell you how much this conversation opened a lot of people's eyes to, including mine. And I always close our shows. I feel this, and it is a collective, everyday thing that, and I always tell my listeners this. They're probably, rolling their eyes now. But if you don't like where you're living, what you're living, you can change that. Just manifest it. People think that, oh, well, that's just a word, and it's not. It's a mindset. If you don't like the attitude of the person you're talking to, make sure that yours is not mirroring theirs. Just be the change. It affects everything around you. And it is something that is innate in all of us. You can do this. Be the friend you'd like to have. Be the neighbor that you would like to have, and you will. It just changes everything. Attitude is all. And as Daniel was saying, these changes are coming. We have to educate ourselves on them. So get his book, Mythos. It is, you'll find it on his website. You'll find it on his Facebook page. You will be able to email him. Just get it. Y'all take care. Same cat time, same cat channel. Daniel, thank you again.
Minor.
Good night.